In 2015, Pew Research Center published an important study addressing the global religious demographic changes. The research reveals a stunning shift that may reshape the global landscape in the coming decades. According to data collected from 175 countries, the study predicted that Islam would record the fastest growth worldwide. By the year 2050, it is expected that the number of Muslims will nearly equal that of Christians around the world. Although the study's projections are based primarily on fertility rates, it also highlights the significance of religious conversions in tipping the scale in favor of Islam. In recent decades, the western half of the world has witnessed scattered waves of people converting to Islam, to the extent that it is now expected that Muslims will make up 10% of Europe's population, and that for the first time in history, their number in the United States will surpass that of the Jewish population. This leads us to ask, how is Islam spreading despite all this? And what drives people toward it after the Western civilization had claimed to have completely eradicated religiosity? Awaken the Fitra. On the 4th of February 2016, the Washington Post published an article by Elizabeth King titled, "I'm an atheist, so why can't I shake God?" Within its lines, the writer expressed, "It's confusing and frustrating to feel the presence of something you don't believe in. While I remain steadfast in my non-belief, I also feel I have no choice but to accept that I'm an atheist with a sense for God." In these words, one can sense the confusion of the writer, torn between what she claims as truth and the truth stirring within her soul, which she cannot understand or explain. But what she doesn't know is that the answer to her question is simpler than she imagines. For in the noble hadith, everyone is born a Muslim, but his parents make him a Jew, a Christian, or a Magian. Sahih al-Bukhari, 1385, Sahih Muslim, 2658. Belief in Allah, as writer Abdullah al-Shiri puts it, is not just a piece of information or an idea, it is a need and a direction. And a living embodiment of all this is the story of American mathematician Jeffrey Lang. 10 years before embracing Islam, Lang saw a recurring dream. In it, he was in an empty room with a group of men performing unfamiliar movements, following a man in a white robe and turban. Though he saw the dream 10 times, Lang didn't give it much thought amid a life filled with inner misery. A man who had achieved nearly all his dreams and reached the pinnacle of academic excellence, yet felt immense despair after all he had accomplished. He had not found the true spiritual happiness he was seeking. He once said, "We are nothing more than one of the animal species trying to live happily." Is that all there is to life? One success followed by another, and so on, until we disappear? Studies confirm Lang's depiction of the hollow lives of many atheists, empty of value or meaning. In 2002, two researchers from the World Health Organization, Jose Manuel and Alexandra Fleischman, published a study on the relationship between suicide and religious beliefs. They found that suicide rates in Muslim-majority countries were strikingly low. Out of every 100,000 people, the suicide rate was 0.1 in these countries. In contrast, it was 10 per 100,000 in Christian-majority countries. And in countries with widespread atheism, the rate jumped to 26 per 100,000. Another study conducted by Gallup in 2017, covering 67 countries, confirmed this inverse relationship between religiosity and suicide. The more religious a country, the lower its suicide rate. In Kuwait, which topped the list of most religious countries with an 83% religiosity rate, the suicide rate didn't even approach 2%. Meanwhile, Estonia, the least religious country in the study, had a religiosity rate near 20%, and its suicide rate was nearly the same. The highest suicide rates were recorded in Belarus and Russia, 36.8% and 36.15% respectively, which matched their low religiosity levels of 35% and 28%. Amid the spiritual confusion and existential loss, Jeffrey Lang found his guidance through a translated copy of the Quran, gifted to him by one of his students. He opened it during a quiet, solitary moment and read the words of his Lord with the hunger of a thirsty man who had found pure water. Describing that moment, he said, "When I read the Quran for the first time, I felt as if the Quran was reading me." To Lang, the Quran was different, not just a spiritual or moral text like the ones he heard in Sunday church sermons. It was a unique book with no equal. He said, The Quran was always way ahead of my thinking. It was addressing my queries. Each night I would formulate questions and objections and somehow discover the answer the next day. I had met myself in its pages, moved by this profound transformation. Lang descended from his academic office to the college mosque, where he declared his Islam. And there he witnessed something that struck his heart with deep certainty. He saw the prayer. Only then did he realize that the visions he had seen over the years were divine glad tidings guiding him to Islam. So he embraced it. And when his daughter asked him, "Why did you become Muslim?" he answered her, "I collapsed into the mercy that flowed from the supreme love. I had come back home again." The religion of all mankind. In his study of the phenomenon of embracing Islam in the West, Algerian researcher Ibrahim Boulfelfel found that a number of interconnected reasons are behind the conversion of Westerners to Islam. Among these reasons is the search for spirituality and meaning, as seen in the story of Jeffrey Lang. However, what distinguishes Islam from any other spiritual path is its rationality and intellectual harmony, which make Islam a comprehensive way of life. And this is precisely what drew Lang to Islam. In his book, Islam at the Crossroads, the Austrian thinker Muhammad Assad discusses the prevailing views in the West about Islam, those that blame Islam for the decline and backwardness of Muslims. Yet his journey toward understanding Islam revealed to him that the one and only reason for the social and cultural decay of the Muslims consisted in the fact that they had gradually ceased to follow the teachings of Islam in spirit. Islam, which once saved collapsing empires from disintegration, is capable today of contributing to answering the confusion and questions of Western civilization. And this specifically is the attractive force that the enemies of Islam simply cannot confront. Illusion and reality. In the year 1924, a young French philosopher stood contemplating the modern Western world in the aftermath of a devastating world war. Europe was left without the Islamic Caliphate after its fall in Turkey. Britain, France, and their European counterparts were rampaging through much of the Muslim world with their colonialism. Meanwhile, secular atheism was spreading deeper across their own Christian homelands, while communist atheism was gaining momentum in the East under the newly born Soviet Union, which had risen from the ashes of the Russian Tsardom. That philosopher stood before a civilization stretching its arms across the globe, yet he did not see in it the brilliance of cities or the marvels of technology. Rather, behind the curtains of material progress, he discerned the long shadow of a hungry beast that had devoured the soul and taken its place. This civilization had embarked on a path where the universe was nothing but equations and laboratories. Modern civilization forgot that man is not a machine with gears to be adjusted, but a being with a heart that hears both the silence of the stars and the noise of the earth. In this context, our philosophers saw that Islam stood out as a creed distinct from all others. Within it lies a complete vision of existence that rejects the rift between matter and spirit and restores man to his innate balance, after modernity had torn him apart, a body weighed down by desires and a mind exhausted by doubts. These reflections were all compiled by the French thinker in a book he titled The East and the West, signed under the name René Guénon, and between parentheses, he inscribed his new name, Abd al-Wahid Yahya. But if we wish to reflect on the greatest and most telling moment in this regard, we would find it in the recent aggression on Gaza. During that period, Western civilization stood exposed before its own people, even before the rest of the world. They saw through the lies they had long parroted about rights and freedoms. They discovered the truth in what the Polish philosopher Zygmunt Bauman once said in his book, Modernity and the Holocaust, where he explained that the Holocaust was not merely a German crime, but rather an inevitable result of the philosophy of Western modernity, a philosophy built upon Darwinism and the stripping of values from politics. And so, Western civilization has failed its moral and ethical test. It failed the tests of meaning and sound thought, and Islam emerged tall, a safe harbor for the wandering hearts, opening its doors to all those worn down by hollow materialism.
So repeat after me. أشهد أشهد
أشهد
ألا ألا
ألا
إله
إله
إلا الله
إلا الله
وأشهد
وأشهد
أن
أن
محمدا
محمدا
رسول الله
Rasulullah.
Thus, its spread in the West is not just about numbers and statistics. It is a living testimony that when the innate nature, fitrah, awakens, it cannot resist the light of guidance nestled within the soul. For Allah created them and cast into their hearts knowledge of Him. And mention when your Lord took from the children of Adam, from their loins, their descendants, and made them testify of themselves, saying to them, Am I not your Lord? They said, Yes, we have testified this, lest you should say on the day of resurrection, Indeed we were of this unaware. Al-A'raf 172.